Today we're going to have a chat with Dan Ellis, who has successfully turned 2 side-by-side homes into 4 properties, built new semi-detached homes with basement suites in each of them. He had to get a few things pushed through at City Council. Stay tuned to see how he got the job done.
So there is a disconnect between a physical reality here and what is required on paper. Because if you drive by the site, you'll see very quickly and definitively that parking should not really be an issue.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Yeah, your property is
Thanks for watching. This is Andy from Sweet Additions. If you're new here, we're an architectural design company helping homeowners and investors create more housing units and generate long-term wealth using the Max Suite strategy. Over the years, we have completed many small-scale infill projects and helped over 400 clients legally convert their homes to multiple units, boosting cash flow and house value. Additionally, we have a comprehensive Max Suite strategy in-person training program and investor community. Our next session is coming up in a few months. If you're interested, please check out the details in the description below. Also, it would help us out if you can give us a like and subscribe so we can get this message out to more people. We have a real treat for you today. We had the pleasure of interviewing Dan Ellis, a developer with a background in urban planning and engineering, to discuss his infill project in Woodstock, Ontario. Dan took 2 side-by-side homes on a corner lot and severed them, turning 2 lots into 4. In the 2 new lots, Dan built 2 semi-detached homes, each with their own accessory dwelling unit, creating 4 brand new units. This created tremendous value out of the existing land that he already owned. The great news is that these opportunities exist everywhere in Ontario, Canada, and North America. We just need to know the strategies and apply some creativity. Let's now have a chat with Dan so we can learn how we can also do this ourselves.
Okay, so we have Dan Ellis here at his project in Woodstock. Dan, thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for
coming
coming
on. Good to see you. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're in the basement, obviously. This is a big project for you. Why don't you kind of maybe introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the project?
Sure. So I'm a real estate investor, a full-time real estate investor. I've got a background in civil engineering and urban planning, which has kind of led me into doing new builds like the one we're standing in today. For this project specifically, this was a land severance project. So we were able to get the land for very low cost by owning the 2 houses next door and severing off both their backyards to get 2 building lots out of that. And from there, we were able to build 2 houses, actually. So a pair of semi-detached houses.
Right.
And currently in the process of converting both the basements into additional units for a total of 4 units.
Did you acquire those 2 properties together, and when was that?
So actually, no, we didn't. So my mom and stepdad bought a corner lot, an investment property on a large corner lot.
And when was that?
That was 2014.
Okay.
And like I said, this was corner lot, had a nice big deep backyard, and they ended up talking to the city about could they sever this off to create a building lot, to which the city said no. They said there was lots of frontage there, but it wasn't deep enough.
Right.
They said the only way you could do it is if you got some of the backyard from the house next door to theirs.
Okay.
A couple of years go by, and all of a sudden the house next door just happens to come for sale. I had been thinking about this for quite some time, and I went and I bought the house next door.
Okay, so they listed it on MLS, and you acquired it through.
Yeah, and then with that house there, so both the house my parents own and the one I own, we turned those into rental properties. We were able to put tenants in there. Actually, the house I owned ended up being a pretty good investment in its own right. And that's kind of how we got to this point.
Right. Okay. So really is, the original investment property, obviously that worked on its own, and then you acquired that property that worked on its own as a rental property. And now you're sort of looking at, how can you add even more value by severing the land and then building.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, so let's get into that.
Yep.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about the kind of the land severance process and kind of slowly where, how you got to where you are right now.
Sure. So one thing I'll start with is when I bought that house next to my parents, I didn't just buy it blindly hoping that I could do this. What I actually did is I spent some time going through the zoning bylaws, and I have a bit of a leg up because I'm a drafter by trade. So I was able to kind of make up some drawings of exactly how I would sever this property and present that to the city's planning department. And I got them to comment on it, and they were relatively in support of severing a couple building lots. So it was after I got that positive feedback that I pulled the trigger on purchasing that property.
Right.
Once I had purchased that property, some of the next steps were to get a survey. So we had to survey the two properties. Once I had the survey, I made up a formal severance drawing for exactly how I would legally separate the properties. And then we paid a bit of money for an application fee to sever the property, and there were a number of minor variances involved with this as well. So we put that application forward. We went to what's called a committee of adjustment meeting, which is where you publicly have to go and state your case in front of a selected committee who are either going to approve or deny your application.
Do you mind just maybe giving the audience a little bit of a background about the committee of adjustments and who these people are?
Sure. So the committee of adjustment are appointed individuals, they're not elected. And essentially what they do is they will grant you things such as minor variances or consents, which is kind of the formal term for a severance.
Right. So if you want to sever a property, or a lot of people call it partitioning a property, you would have to apply for what's called a consent application. And through that process, there probably are going to be minor variances such as like setbacks, parking, unit sizes and things like that.
Yeah, and on this one specifically, we ended up needing 5 minor variances, which is quite a few.
Right.
One of them was actually fairly significant, but the city has quite an appetite for infill development like this. And the other thing I should mention too is we're almost right downtown in the middle of the city here too. So this location was kind of they were extra in support, if you want to call it that, of getting some infill housing built here.
Yeah, absolutely. We noticed that a lot of cities, both at the planning staff level and even at the committee of adjustments level, they are generally in support of higher density, especially closer to the core of the city where there's a lot more activity going on. There's more transportation options as well. It's more walkable compared to out in the first or second ring suburbs. So that's kind of what you had as a sort of a tailwind to kind of help you with that process, right?
Yep. So we went to the committee of adjustment meeting. Planning was heavily in support of this, and I got no pushback from anyone at the city, any neighbors either on this one. And they granted us our lot severance here.
Right. So the severance pretty much was for, so you had the 2 existing properties side by side on a corner lot.
Correct.
They were very deep properties.
Yep.
And so you were able to convert these 2 very long lots into 4 lots in total. So you brought in 2 additional lots. You built a semi-detached home, which is basically 2 separate homes that are attached together, each on separate titles. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So actually, this is maybe not as well known. The way the city had me do this was we actually severed off one lot, one big building lot, and then the city wanted the building to be in place before we further divided that lot to be its own left and right address.
Right.
The reason why the city wanted it done that way is so that the common wall didn't mistakenly end up on the wrong side of the lot line. So when you have the building already in place, you can come in and survey it and actually use where the wall exists to establish that new lot line.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a very important thing that a lot of people don't think about when you're building new, right? So
For sure.
kind of establishing where the lot line.
Not all cities do it that way either. There are a number of other cities, whether you're building a semi-detached or a row of townhomes.
Right.
They may sever up each lot ahead of time, and it's your responsibility to put the foundation where it's required. So to get to the point of owning a new building lot and completing that severance process, some of the fees involved were getting a survey, which at the time was around $3,000. There was some legal costs in that, so your lawyer has to formally register your new lot on title, and that was about another $3,000. And there are application fees for the severance and for all the minor variances. So to get to the point of approval, it cost me about $10,000 to get that building lot.
Okay, yeah, that's not bad at all to get the additional lots. That's really good. Okay, so yeah, thanks for sharing all that. I think that covers quite a bit about the sort of development process. Went relatively smooth, so congratulations on that. But of course, you had to submit building permits, you had to get that reviewed, and then of course you had to build and the inspection. So why don't you jump into the building, the permit submission and reviews and all that?
So yeah, as you're aware, what we ended up building here was a pair of semi-detached houses.
Yep.
And ultimately now we're finishing the basements into additional residential units for a total of 4 units. So what I originally applied for was a pair of semi-detached houses. And I had showed the basements being finished into additional residential units.
Right.
At the time, the city was not approving those. So after some back and forth with the city, they had made it fairly clear that they weren't going to allow basement units, but I still wanted to move forward.
So at the time when you were ready to build these, did Woodstock or did this city not permit second units at all at that point, or was it specific to a new build?
What it was at that time was it was very restrictive. There was parking requirements, there were some lot size requirements that would be tough to meet in any infill scenario. So the amount of houses that could actually have a secondary unit based on the zoning at that time was not all that many. And that stifled me from being able to move forward with basement units at the time of construction. Right.
Okay. Yeah. So tell us more about kind of the building permit process and everything after that.
So I decided to move forward with the 2 semis, and with the hopes that one day I could maybe do some basement units. So one thing I should touch on very quickly is these houses should be very familiar to you personally.
Yes.
Because you and your partners actually built this pair of semis.
Yeah.
And so I had actually connected with you guys and got your plans and altered them very slightly for my lots, and ended up actually building the same house as you guys did. I think in 2019 when you guys built them.
Yeah. So for those of you who've been following us for a long time, you may have seen one of our old videos where we showed a pair of semis in the city of St. Catharines. And basically Dan was able to essentially do almost identically what we did, which was have the 2 lots severed into 4, and then have a deep enough lot where basically he was able to utilize these plans and alter them slightly to comply with maybe certain bylaws here and ask for specific variances. But essentially, like, I feel like this is my first time in this basement. I feel like I've been here before.
For sure. And you know what? One of the nice things about kind of repeating a build is lessons are learned on the first time through, and there are things that maybe you would do different the next time. Well, I kind of had the opportunity of being the next time on this one. Yeah. So when I was constructing this, there was certain little things I maybe changed that you guys maybe encountered that could have been done differently. But when it was all said and done, you guys came up with a design that worked and did very well for you guys. So it made a lot of sense to me to not reinvent the wheel and go with something that's proven.
Yeah, absolutely. It worked really well, and we were able to kind of prove the concept on the other property. We had them rented out. We knew the numbers, so we can just basically extrapolate that information and determine what numbers work in this particular market, right? But the building code is the same no matter where you are in Ontario, and as a matter of fact, they're going to amalgamate it soon across the country as well. Yes. So having pre-approved plans or plans that have been used before and kind of repurposing them, it's not only going to save money, but also will save time, right?
For sure.
So yeah, I think that was a great thing that you did that.
Yeah, for sure. So I was able to get building permits kind of at the end of 2021, and then we started construction in 2022. So I spent about 8 months building the two semi-detached houses. I general contracted it all myself, so that was a first for me as well.
Yeah.
And having people in your corner that have done a number of builds, including this exact build, was super valuable to be able to call and ask questions and get help here and there when it came to taking on a project of this magnitude, especially for the first time.
Yeah, I know, it was great to see your progress. Yeah. So I know that you, we're here in the basement. This is a separate unit. It was challenging, but you did get it done. So why don't you share a little bit about that process to get the actual basement suites? I know you had to attend minor variances specifically for the basement suites, right?
Actually, it didn't end up being a minor variance.
Okay.
So I tried to go that route.
Right.
It didn't quite work out. But essentially what had happened was I built the semis and I finished at the end of 2022. And I immediately kind of turned around and put forward new building permit applications to convert these basement units into additional residential units, to which I was told I would not be able to. There was not enough parking. But as you saw when you were standing out front with me, there's plenty of parking. There's
right.
parking for 4 cars in each driveway plus 1 in the garage. The problem I ran into is that the city wouldn't let me count the first 20 feet of the driveway because it's technically city boulevard.
Right.
And although the driveways are wide enough for 2 vehicles, it's not quite wide enough on paper. And you're only allowed to use 50% of your front yard for parking reasons.
Yeah.
So with all that said, they would not let my building permit applications move forward. From there, I ended up speaking to the planning department about potential minor variances, to which I was told they wouldn't support. And there was a record of them turning down some similar minor variances, whether it was for parking or a wider driveway. So after the planning department didn't really seem to have an appetite for this, I ended up reaching out to my MPP, and although it was their government that put forward a lot of the new policies like Bill 108 and Bill 23, they said it's ultimately a municipal matter.
Yeah.
So they were sympathetic, but they said there's nothing we could really do to help. So after I exhausted that route, I ended up getting in touch with the mayor of the city here and a couple councilors as well. And I told them the problem I was having. I had advised that there were numerous policies, provincially, federally, and at the local level that called for infill development, just as I've done here. And especially considering the fact that we're almost right downtown. Yeah. So the mayor and councilor actually came over, and I showed them the project, and I showed them these exact basements. And they said, this doesn't seem right, and let's see if we can help you. And so a bit of time went by, and some questions were asked around the city, and nothing was really happening. It still wasn't going anywhere. And so I got word of a public meeting that was all around additional residential units. They were proposing some changes, and the changes they were proposing still would not allow me to do the basement units. So I ended up going to that meeting. I got up in front of the mayor. And I
think we have video of that, process. Yeah.
So there's a video of it out there.
Yeah. We'll share that with everyone.
I got up in front of the mayor and city council, and I stated my case, and I brought up examples from other cities. And so I proposed a couple changes that they could make.
I guess just one other comment I would make is on this specific property here. It's a semi-detached building. Each of the driveways plus garage can currently hold 5 cars. I'm not asking to go from 2 down to 1 or 2 down to 0. The problem that I'm personally up against, and maybe this is something else city could consider, is that I'm not allowed to count the first 20 feet behind the sidewalk. I'm not allowed to count the extra width because it's not quite 3 meters. So there is a disconnect between a physical reality here and what is required on paper. Because if you drive by the site, you'll see very quickly and definitively that parking should not really be an issue for this property specifically. But I also don't want to make it just about my specific example. I do seriously believe that this will affect far more than just what I'm personally working with.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to kind of continue along that, then, yeah, your property is a prime example. I remember pulling up to it and seeing it and thinking, how is parking an issue here? I didn't understand until you explained it.
Yep.
Later in the week, they actually took a few of my comments and they put it to a vote, and they actually voted 4-3 to change their zoning just enough to allow me to do the basement units here. So I've actually got
4-3. That's awesome.
Yeah. But the interesting thing though is with the housing shortage we're in, and the numerous policies calling for infill development and intensification.
Yeah.
3 councillors still couldn't even vote for the minor changes required to get basement units in an area like this. So yeah. I think there is a bit of a disconnect between some of the provincial legislation that we've seen and where some of the local municipalities are at.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. And I think that the fact that you got 4 out of 3 means that the tides have changed, and it's still changing. Yeah. It's a slow process, but I think that's, the wind is at our back now. And if you want to be the type of investor and developer to do these infill projects, now is, there's no better time than now to do them. Yeah,
and one comment I would make too on that is the mayor himself and a few of the councillors are actually very pro-development and did not really cause any challenges, and were very helpful and sympathetic too. Yeah. So there are people at the city that can also be your biggest allies when it comes to these projects like these, should you run into any resistance. And I think it's just important to connect with your elected officials and other people at the city, and try to be helpful and state your case well when trying to do stuff like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all, our goal is to provide more housing, right? And it's something that is a mandate, whether it's the municipal or provincial level. So if you can kind of help them in that process, and a lot of times help them learn the process as well, they'll be on your side, right? If you can help make things easier for them.
For sure. So once the zoning bylaw had changed, and essentially what they did change is they allowed more of the front yard to be used as parking. So once that had changed, I was able to finally resubmit my building permits for the basement units. They were fairly quickly approved. The turnaround time was good. And then, so the last few months, I've been taking these basement units and getting them to the state they're at now, and hopefully done in the next maybe month and a half or so. Yeah,
I think you're in the home stretch here.
It feels like it.
Okay. All right. So why don't you share a little bit about the build process and, what was involved in, the main house, and then, of course, subsequently with these basements as well.
For sure. So as mentioned earlier, I general contracted the build myself, which means I acted as the contractor, and I hired sub trades to do every task from there on forward. So we started with a big old excavation. So as you're aware, these basements are 9 feet tall. So that gave us a bit of extra head height, which has really helped in these basement units. So we started with the excavation. We poured our foundation and pretty much hopped into framing right after that. So all of that went very quickly and relatively smoothly to start. From there, it was kind of just bringing in one contractor after the next kind of as I was being helped from some more experienced builders as well. So.
Now, would you recommend for most people to project manage themselves, or do you recommend that people hire a builder, or does it depend?
It really depends, and I'll be the first to say that taking on a build yourself and general contracting yourself is not and should not be for everyone. I think if you've got some significant renovation experience,
yep.
and most importantly, if you have somebody in your corner that has done a number of builds and is willing to help you and look things over and answer questions and maybe provide some subcontractors, I think you're in a good position to take on something like this. But if you've got a couple renovations under your belt, this is a very different process. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I mean, you have a engineering background, urban planning, you've done drafting, so you might as well put in builder in there as well, right?
For sure.
Cool. You want to talk a little bit about any of the challenges with kind of the build process?
There were some challenges and some unique challenges to this site specifically. So one thing that happens a lot with infill builds is sometimes the grading in the lot itself isn't necessarily the most ideal. And that's actually kind of why that land likely wasn't developed up until this point. So on this property specifically, there was a really heavy crossfall from the right side of the property to the left, which had us building a massive retaining wall at about 8 feet tall and about 75 feet long. That added some definite challenges to this. So dealing with the grading, trying to get all the water to leave the site and have enough slope on the land was really challenging to make that all work.
Yep.
And then same with in relation to like the eaves troughs and where is the water going to come out. Yep. That was a continual theme, challenging theme on this build here. I would say the other challenge too with taking on a first build like I've done here is the fact that I started with a 4-unit build. That was a little challenging as well because there's a whole extra layer of a fire separation component.
Yep.
and 4 independent mechanical systems. So each unit has its own furnace and its own AC and its own electric panel and separated plumbing as well. So dealing with all that extra layers of challenges definitely complicated things a little bit too.
Yeah, and because it's a new build, the code is going to be more stringent, right? Like you have to go everything with part 9.
Yeah.
Whereas if you had an existing structure and you're converting to 3-4 units, you get the more lenient part of the code, which is part 11. So they make things a little bit easier. Definitely what you're doing here is, a step beyond our typical max suite strategy, which is take the existing home, convert that to 2, 3, 4 units. And then if you're going to build something new, it's going to be a garden suite, but it's going to be 1 unit, right?
Yeah.
So the garden suite that you built in Kitchener, that was beautiful, but it was 1 unit. So even though you had a basement, you didn't have to worry about fire separation and kind of getting all the pipes and everything like that fire protected.
I'll put it this way. If I built one house on a flat piece of land, I would have breezed right through this. That was the challenges with this here.
Yeah, well, you jumped right on the deep end.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Dan, thanks so much for sharing, the whole build process. Do you mind getting into the numbers a little bit in terms of, you shared the development cost, but what about the build costs and, the cost to do the separation and the basements as well?
Sure. So to get the 2 semis built, not including the basement units, that cost about $670,000 plus HST.
Right.
So when it was all said and done, I had built this in 2022. Out of pocket, it ended up being about $840,000, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Including tax, right?
Including tax.
Okay. But obviously you're going to get some of that back, and then there's also the HST rebate that you're going to benefit from as well, right?
Yes, and so when it all kind of shook out, it wasn't a straight $845,000. And then with some of the recent changes, HST on builds like this may no longer apply. So that's something I'm personally kind of keeping an eye on. Should I choose to do a project like this.
Yeah, because there was a federal announcement probably several months or a year ago that talked about eliminating that for new builds to just encourage more construction.
Yep. So a couple other interesting points when it comes to the cost associated with this was I was able to get it built for somewhere in the neighborhood of about $190 per square foot.
Is that including tax or not including?
Not including.
No, it's $190 a square foot for the 2 units, not including the basement yet.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So there were some extra costs that I incurred here that someone else likely won't. And one of those was the big retaining wall to make the lot level so we could build on it. So that retaining wall ended up costing somewhere between 40 and 50,000. So I'm factoring that into my per square foot cost as well. So someone, again, doing a simple bill on a flat piece of land may not incur something like that. But
Right. And one thing to also keep in mind is that $190 does not include your time, right?
it does not include my time. So
And your time is worth something.
my time is worth something, but at the time I was hungry to take on a build.
Yeah.
I was happy to be down here, and I did some work myself too. There was days I'd have a hammer in my hand, and I got it done.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I mean, a lot of people want to take on their own projects, but you just really need to be mindful that, is it worth your time to do, right? Because if you are going to be hiring a full-on builder, they're going to have Terry-on warranty, they're going to be HCRA registered. Their cost for something like this is definitely not going to be $190 a square foot, right?
Yep. And I would say too is I am looking at my next project. I did acquire a piece of land, and there were a lot of lessons learned on this. And one of the lessons learned is I don't want to do it like that again. And I think there is kind of a middle ground where maybe some construction management can be hired, where I'm still general contracting it, but I'm not running to site for things like deliveries and meeting with every last sub trade that comes to site. So on the next one, I'll definitely be looking to remove myself from it a little bit more than I did on this one.
Yeah, that's great. It's all about kind of learning lessons on one and taking it on to the next project, right? Yeah, that's great. Do you want to share, so right now you have the 2 units completed fully upstairs.
Yes.
You're completing the 2 in the basement.
Yep.
Would you mind sharing some of the rental numbers that you're getting for your existing units?
Sure. So each of the 2 upstairs units, which are 3-bed, 2.5 bath units at about 1,750 square feet, they both rent for $2,150 right now.
Plus utilities, of course.
Plus all utilities.
Yep.
And then the basements, when this is all complete, I'm projecting about $1,600 for each basement unit. And again, they will be paying for all their utilities as well.
Yeah, and that's the one benefit about doing everything new. It's very easy to separate all utilities, right? So you have separate electricity, you have separate water, you have separate furnaces for each unit. Because your intention was going in there and doing the 4 units right from the get-go.
Yep.
Yeah.
But some challenges too is doing these basement units retroactively definitely presents some challenges as well. Just with having people upstairs, you try and be respectful of noise and everything else, and it's challenging. And things like if you got to do some plumbing work, you can't necessarily go and just kill the plumbing on the people upstairs, right? So and another thing too is it just costs more money to get the trades to come back a year and a half later when they were on site the first time and all their equipment was here and their manpower was here, they would have been able to fairly easily and a little more cost efficiently do the basement. So that is one thing I'm experiencing right now. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that in the future, if you can kind of do everything all at once, that cost will definitely come down if you're able to get them to do everything together.
For sure. And I'm projecting each of the basement units to finish for somewhere around 80,000. So again, that's adding a second furnace, separate electrical. So it's more than just a straight basement renovation. Yeah. But that's kind of what I think we're looking at.
That's a really good number. Yeah.
I'm hoping so.
Yeah. Dan, thank you so much. This was amazing. Thank you for sharing all of this insight. This is going to be so valuable for those that really want to take the max use strategy and go even, a few steps beyond and do some small scale infill development. And there's plenty of opportunity to do this. We're in the perfect environment for it. The government is, at various levels are encouraging it, but sometimes you just have to step out of your comfort zone a little bit and push a little bit like Dan did. But if you give it enough time, you will definitely get the result, if not for your first project, for a future project. So thank you so much for sharing, Dan. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
Okay, a big thank you to Dan again for allowing us to check out his incredible infill development project. He was able to create a tremendous amount of value for himself and provide the much needed housing for his community. We hope you enjoyed learning about Dan's project and inspired to embark on your own infill development project. This type of project is one step beyond the scope of the max REIT strategy, but can be incredibly profitable, and we encourage people to look out for these lots. Infill developments is also a topic we dive into in our upcoming max REIT strategy training program. More info on that below if you're interested in diving into the details and joining our community. One additional note is that Dan is also the owner of Water Bill Solutions, where he helps homeowners split up their water meter with sub-meters and allow for remote readings. You can check it out at waterbillsolutions.com. Thanks for watching to the end, everyone. Let us know what you think about this project, and please leave any questions or comments below. To learn more about the Max Suite strategy, download our free guides at suiteeditions.com and get started. And if you enjoyed this video, here's another great one for you.